Higuruma Hiromi, the star that shines in potential just as bright as Gojo Satoru, one of the strongest characters in all of Jujutsu Kaisen, has recently gotten a massive spotlight. So I would like to take this time to address how strong is Higuruma Hiromi in this video today. Because, oh boy, Higuruma is very strong. He's probably one of the most underrated characters in all of Jujutsu Kaisen, but let me take you on a journey to help you understand the true strength of Higuruma. However, before we even start that, be sure to like and subscribe. Like anime content like this, we got a lot more on the way, whether it comes to power scaling, character analysis, or theories, and more. We got a lot more. So let's get straight into the video. So Higuruma Hiromi only has 2 fights within Jujutsu Kaisen, which makes him much easier to scale. However, these 2 fights are against very impressive fighters, those 2 fighters being Yuji Itadori and Ryomen Sukuna himself. However, before Higuruma even fights either of these opponents, we find out that Higuruma is one of the 2 players in the Culling Games that was capable of achieving over 100 points, with the other player who was capable of achieving that being Hajime Kashimo himself. However, we know that Higuruma was capable of achieving over 100 points through fighting several sorcerers, and that's all thanks to his abilities, his reinforcement skills, and his domain. Now, normally I would save explaining what his ability does for later into the video, but I feel it's good to start by immediately explaining what his ability and how his domain even functions. Higuruma has a domain that is a court trial, where in said court trial, both Higuruma and the opponent are not able to hurt each other in the domain. After all, physical violence is not allowed and prohibited specifically inside of the domain, resulting in a court case beginning between Higuruma and Yuji, with a Shikigami being known as Judgeman being the one responsible for the trial. It's then soon after the Judgeman presents a crime that they are accusing the person who is defending themselves inside the domain, with Higuruma gaining access to a piece of evidence chosen at random for the opponent. While Judgeman themselves directly knows everything about both the people inside of the domain, he will not share everything with either people inside of the domain, and the Judgeman only decides judgment based on the claims that are made by either of the people. However, there is a single bit of evidence given to Higuruma as an exception. However, very interestingly, Judgeman's judgment seems to be based completely on Higuruma's view of law and what is legal and what is not legal. That is what decides the law for Judgeman, and this is going to be very important for something else I'm about to talk about in a sec. In the domain itself, both parties only get 1 chance in order to make a statement. However, Higuruma gets a chance to make a rebuttal with the evidence he gains in consideration for that rebuttal, where within the domain you have 3 options of ways to fight back, which is silence, confession, and denial. Silence is basically choosing not to fight back at all. Denial is trying to deny everything, which includes false statements themselves. Confession is basically confessing to the crime itself and saying that you are guilty for this, which is basically pleading guilty for the crime. At the end, the Judgeman will call judgment, where he will choose whether to give confiscation, death penalty, or not say that anyone is guilty. Furthermore, you are capable of causing 2 retrials, where in these retrials you will be called for a different crime. However, you can also continue a crime that you're already in court for previously, as shown with Yuji and Sukuna. Now, it should be noted, confiscation and death penalty can both happen at the same time, where when death penalty happens, it gives Higuruma a sword, where if that sword is able to stab you or slash at you, it will kill you in 1 shot. However, confiscation will take something away from the opponent themselves directly. Now, remember earlier when I said this is based on Higuruma's viewpoint of law? This is where this is going to come up and be actually relevant for this video. This is very much based on Higuruma's view of how the law functions. Because of that, as a result of that, there is an order of what is confiscated from the opponent, where the first thing that will be confiscated is always going to be the cursed tool. This is due to Japan having an entire law of confiscating weapons first. Then, up next, it's the cursed technique, and then finally, it's the cursed energy themselves. As this is where Higuruma's talent shines as a sorcerer. Higuruma is an incredibly intelligent man, as I'm now going to read out the text directly. While researching his curse technique, he discovered that he could use the domain expansion and the basics of barrier techniques without any need need to practice, and by working backwards, reverse engineering the barrier technique, he swiftly gained an intuition for strengthening techniques by controlling cursed energy. In the 12 days from the awakening of his cursed technique, he grew to a level no different from a first-grade sorcerer. He defeated countless cursed spirits before entering the colony, and he also defeated over 20 players who attacked him. Now, this massive raw amount of talent that Higuruma has always been shown throughout all of Jujutsu Kaisen, where Higuruma was someone who was able to pass through so many barriers of laws and learning laws super easily. He is a prodigy in several rights, and his talent shines brightest, as that was what allowed him to achieve such an insane level of power. However, before we even get into Higuruma's feats, I want to talk about the sponsor of today's video, Fandomio. If you've been with the channel for a while, you know we are partnered with Fandomio. They have been supporting the channel for a long while, and I really recommend checking out their anime merch. They have amazing anime merch, and most of it right now is 50% off. Yeah, you heard me, 50% off. And on top of that, if you use my code, TEF, you will get an additional discount on top of that. It is a steal. I really, really recommend it, and now is the best time, if ever, to get this merch. Like, it's a benefit for all of us. You guys get good merch, it helps support the channel, and a lot of it is off, yet it still has amazing high quality. If there's one thing I'd really recommend, I would recommend the 6 Eyes ring, because that is gas, and I'm actually planning to get that for myself. However, that's the end of this sponsored message. Let's get back into the video. Now, in order to understand how strong Higuruma is, we first need to go over how strong Yuji is, because Higuruma mainly scales to Yuji Itadori without cursed energy. Now, Higuruma is physically capable of taking out 20 Jujutsu sorcerers on his own, alongside several cursed spirits, all during the time of the Culling Games itself. And while their techniques were likely confiscated, they still had cursed energy reinforcement that they could fight alongside. However, we don't know how those fights went, so we can't really use them to scale. It's just really impressive he was able to fight experienced fighters like this. However, now back to Yuji and where Yuji ends up scaling. Now, if you do not believe Yuji has physically gotten stronger at all across Jujutsu Kaisen and has stayed the same physical strength, like just pure raw physical body alone, and stayed that strong physically since the start of the series, then you get Higuruma at pretty insane levels. Higuruma was able to basically beat down Yuji without cursed energy. And Yuji at the same time is someone who Megumi directly states in the beginning of the series would be capable of fighting everybody without cursed energy, and if they all fought Yuji together without cursed energy, they would all still lose to Yuji Itadori. This is insane because of the fact Maki herself does not use cursed energy. Now, yes, this was not fully awakened Maki, this was pre-awakened Maki, but they still were physically noted to be much stronger than average, which means Yuji scales above that Maki, and Higuruma would scale above that level. However, if you think that Yuji gets physically stronger across JJK, this could be even more insane. This is especially supported by the fact that Higuruma is stated to be on the level of a grade 1 sorcerer, which varies a lot in scale, I'm not gonna lie, because a lot of grade 1s kind of get stronger as JJK continues, and there's just so many distances between the levels of grade 1 sorcerers. For example, this could mean they are on par with base Nanami, they're on par with Nanami in overtime, they're on par with Todo after landing a Black Flash, or they're on par with Kusakabe, or most of all, they're on par with Meimei with her Bird Strike, because it's noted that Meimei needed Bird Strike in order to achieve the power of a grade 1, which is absolutely nuts. However, this scaling also goes nuts if you think Yuji at all got stronger throughout Jujutsu Kaisen, at least physically in terms of body, and not just his cursed energy reinforcement, which is actually supported by his battle against Yuta directly, where Yuji says him and Yuta are opposites. Where Yuta is physically weak, he has so much cursed energy he can make up for it, in comparison to Yuji, who this implies Yuji doesn't have much cursed energy, but he has such a strong physical body, he makes up for it. This is even further supported by the fact that once his cursed energy is taken away, Higuruma is blown aback by the fact he can still fight against him, and Yuji says that's kinda his main selling point, that he can fight without cursed energy, and he's just so physically strong. Which means he's on par with Culling Games Yuji without cursed energy, which might actually go absolutely ham due to how many statements imply Yuji grows across the arc, with Yuji growing from the Black Flash usage, and then Choso directly saying he's a demon god in comparison to what he is before and not even fully healed, and then he fully heals, and then he loses his cursed energy. Now, we don't know exactly how much of a nerf he gets from losing his cursed energy, but you could at best say Higuruma is able to fight against someone who's a bit weaker than Culling Game's Yuji. And by saying fight against, I'm being a little bit generous to Yuji right now, because Higuruma is actually winning the fight. Now, normally I do not highlight a character's potential in these types of videos in comparison to how strong they actually are. I only like to talk about how good their potential is in their own separate video where I talk and focus on their potential. But this is absolutely nuts. Higuruma in 12 days is able to achieve a similar power to Yuji. This is a power that required him several months of training, being pushed in combat by Mahito and Hanami, while Todo had to guide him on how to get stronger, being pushed several times, landing several black flashes, etc. All this in a much longer time period, while Higuruma was able to achieve this level of power through working backwards and being his own self-teacher. It is absolutely terrifying how powerful Higuruma would be if he started at Jujutsu High, if this wasn't the Culling Games and he actually had a chance to grow and flourish as a sorcerer. Most of all, both Kenjaku and Sukuna directly acknowledge Higuruma's potential, and I want you to keep this in mind. Sukuna doesn't even acknowledge Mahito's potential. The same person who everyone likes to gas up, saying he has the most potential among the disaster curses, that he had the potential to surpass the level of Satoru Gojo, wasn't even put in the same level of consideration and desire of wanting to see that grow as Higuruma's was, in that same level of intrigue, and it makes sense why. Now, all this is to talk about the next point, which is Higuruma after the time skip and how insanely powerful that Higuruma is. Now take all of that potential to grow, and give him 19 days to grow, where he can train with incredibly powerful sorcerers who are incredibly experienced, and it makes sense why he was able to grow to the level where he did, which is showing physical relativity to Yuji Itadori post-time skip. Now, if you've seen how strong I think Yuji in chapter 214 is, well, Sukuna later on makes a direct statement that all of them have leveled up their cursed energy reinforcement. Now, Ino requires an item from Nanami in order to actually be useful in this fight. Choso, well, he got donutted. And Kusakabe had mainly only shown feats of defending himself. However, Higuruma immediately hopped down with Yuji and showed the ability to physically fight alongside Yuji, and that is before even casting the domain, where he just has the mallet out. Now, this is where we are going to get into spoilers for what just happened in the most recent chapter. So if you don't want to know what just happened, skip to the time frame up here where we are no longer going to be talking about the spoilers. But now let's get into the spoilers for the most recent chapter. I hope that was enough of a time to warn you guys that this is the time to click off from the spoilers, so let's get into this. Higuruma displays domain amplification that is stated to be directly equal to that in skill of Sukuna himself, where Sukuna also says Higuruma's ability to control and manipulate his curse technique is directly on par with him. Furthermore, he is able to learn RCT and heal his legs and his arms, something we know from the Culling Games from Ryu directly that is not an easy feat for him to do, but after having RCT explained directly to him, he was able to heal himself off. And finally, he was able to pass his Judgment Sword off to Yuji, which we don't know the full details of it yet, but he was still able to do it nonetheless. Higuruma is an absolute monster and an absolute beast. Despite only being a sorcerer for a total of 1 month, yeah, you heard me, 1 month in total, he was able to achieve such an incredibly high level of sorcery. Of course, yes, in the 19 days, he felt like the biggest amount of pressure in his life and had all of the best teachers with him, but this was still after 1 month of training. It absolutely terrifies me to see what Higuruma would be capable of with years of being pushed to his limits against strong sorcerers and strong curses. Years of pressure to make something incredibly, incredibly powerful with what he has shown in the small time frame that is a month. It's absolutely insane However, that's just my opinion on how strong Higuruma is. I think Higuruma had the potential to grow to the same level as Gojo and maybe even surpass it. Mainly because I don't think Gojo achieved his full potential either, but that is for another day. However, I think Higuruma ended off being insanely strong, being able to show physical relativity, albeit not as strong, to current Yuji Itadori, which is absolutely nuts. With an insta-kill sword, a domain expansion where you can't use acts of violence, and a hammer, as well as the ability to confiscate a cursed technique, a cursed tool, and cursed energy from an opponent as well, so long as they find you guilty. You know, remove the main thing that most people are reliant on. It's just a shame Higuruma got the two people who counter him really, really badly, but even in those situations and scenarios, he was able to show his ability to adapt and figure it out for the better for himself. However, that's about everything, and make sure to remember the star that shines as bright as Gojo Satoru in potential. The limitless potential of Higuruma. I'ma see y'all later. Hope y'all have a good day. Peace out.